You want me to, Mr. Durst?
In a monitor.
We're not here
I
when
need
you're
a
done.
map.
We'll be back.
I hope we have slides. That always makes it more fun.
Okay, it's 10 o'clock. We're going to get started. We've got not a long presentation today, but we have a pretty interesting from Terry, which could take a while, so we want to get started as soon as we can. So, Beverly, do you want to do a roll call for us?
Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Chairman French,
Present.
Mr. Amster.
He said he would be 10 or 15 minutes late.
Thank you. Mr. Ellis.
Here.
Dr. O'Halloran.
Here.
Mr. Dorrance.
Here.
Ms. Odell.
Tabitha has a speaking engagement with the county, so you need to excuse her.
Thank you. Mr. Jones. Mr. Lakakis.
Here.
Mr. Coker.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, first item is the approval of the minutes, so we need a first and a second to approve.
So moved. Second.
Is there any discussion or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor of approving minutes, raise your hands. All opposed? Motion carries. So the first item on our agenda is a public meeting. Hearing rather. And I have to open this by saying, ladies and gentlemen, this hearing is being held in compliance with state law relative to Chatham Area Transit Authority's proposed fiscal year 2020 budget. Information packets showing the proposed budget are available at the front entrance. A list is being passed around asking for the names and addresses of those present. The purpose of this is to document the public input was solicited for future audited purposes. First, the first reading of the fiscal year 2020 proposed operating and capital budget will be presented by our CFO, Terry Harrison. Terry.
Good morning. So for the first reading, you can see that we're about halfway through our budget calendar. We have already completed the internal department budget development. We've presented in 2 budget workshops the proposed preliminary budget. And today we are starting the public hearing portion of the budget adoption, which includes a first reading, a second reading, and then in between we'll hold public hearings on May 8th. So we're set to adopt at next month's meeting. With our budget, we are not asking for a millage increase. It's remaining at 1.15. We're estimating a tax digest growth of 3%. Service level is remaining constant. Wage increases up to 3%, 0 to 3, will be determined over the next 2 or 3 months. And inflation factors from 2% to 25%. The 25% being the health insurance predictions from our broker at this point. So you'll see that we've got revenues equal to $27.1 million, and with an addition of 258 planned for our reserve, a balanced budget. With the capital budget, we've planned for the completion of 4 of our priority projects, and that budget total is $13.6. And with that overview, I'll turn it back over to the public meeting portion.
Bill, I think we do the public meeting.
That's fine.
At this point. So we'll start at the right side of the room and go row by row. If you wish to speak, please stand, state your name, address, and the name of the group or organization you represent, if any. We have staff available to help pass out any written material to the board members. We would ask you to be brief and concise in your remarks, since we have a number of people that may want to speak and we want everyone to have an equal chance to be heard. Do we have anybody who would like to ask questions about the budget?
Mr. Backward is the only member of the public, but he's also a member of the CAT team, so staff can comment or provide input if they'd like.
Okay, then do we have any questions from the, from the staff or the board? Bill?
Just curious why the insurance would have such a high inflation.
When we met with the broker and walked through the claims, we've had a claim experience increase this year. Several with like 9 high dollar claims. So it's strictly based on our claim experience for this current year.
Okay, if we have no other questions, we'll close this public hearing and move on to the rest of the agenda.
Move to close here.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Raise your hand. Motion carries. Okay, moving on to the action items, we have 3. The first is the line of credit renewal, so we need a motion and a second to
So move.
approve.
Move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Then we'll open this up for discussions. Any discussion or questions on the line of credit renewal? Hearing none then, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. All opposed? All abstained? So I believe the motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the Athens Consortium Electric Bus REP participation. We need a motion and a second to approve.
Motion.
Second.
Any discussions or questions on the Athens Consortium? Okay, hearing no questions then, I will call this for a vote. All in favor of the motion, raise your hands. All opposed? All abstaining? Ty, I believe these motions are carrying with the votes.
I'm not counting.
Is,
Your secretary, I assume, is counting.
Beverly? Okay, motion carries. Third action item is the motion for the electric bus charging depot, IFP. So we need a motion and a second for approval.
So move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
I'd like to open this up for questions, discussions. Any comments? Barring none, all in favor of the motion, raise your hands. All opposed? Abstaining? So,
I'm sorry, I was trying to catch up. What are we voting on?
It's the electric bus.
the electric bus charging depot.
Oh yeah, very much in favor of that. Sorry.
Okay, motion carries. Then, I think then we move on to the presentation, which is the FTA oversight and review. A background on this is this came actually when Jay asked us to put the DBE presentation on the agenda for this board meeting. Curtis and I talked and we said, well, why don't we do all of the current FTA reviews that we have in process, get them out of the way all at once. So this is sort of a past and current explanation and review and presentation by Terry. If you would.
To determine if Brandy's not working better. Got it? Ready? Okay.
FTA provides oversight to all transit agencies. They're required to make sure that all of the grant funds awarded to these agencies and expended by these agencies are used consistent with their intended purpose and also in compliance with regulatory and statutory requirements. They do this with a comprehensive oversight review program. They conduct periodic reviews of all agencies that receive federal grant assistance. They do this to assess compliance, provide technical assistance, and to make recommendations for improvement. CAT receives about $3.5 million each year in operating assistance and another $7 to $13 million for capital projects. So, of course, our agency falls under these review procedures. The FTA can order several different types of reviews. The 4 at the top are program oversight reviews, a triennial review, a state management review, a procurement system review, and also a financial management oversight review. We are subject to 3 of these. We don't participate in the state management. Also, there are 4 program reviews, an ADA review, a Title VI review, a DBE review, or an EEOC review.
We knew I was gonna be here, so they need to figure that out.
So, a summary of the process. You usually get a notification letter from Region 4. They explain that they're going to do the review, and they ask for preliminary information. Then CAT, as the grantee, compiles the information and returns it to the review contractor. They come for a site visit. They're usually here 1 to 3 days. They interview staff, they review documentation, and then they issue a draft report that CAT is allowed to review for accuracy. We draft a response, it's incorporated into that report, and then the final report is issued. After the final report is issued, the grantee submits verification to Region 4 that corrections and recommendations have been implemented. So, as a grantee, we have received our share of reviews, a short history. In 2011, we had a financial management oversight review. They sent a review team down here for a couple months to examine our systems, and it was the final hurdle before they gave the green light on the ITC and CAT Central rehabilitation projects. In 2012, they did an extensive procurement system review, and I feel like it was combined with this FMO to make sure that our systems would support the large construction projects. In 2012, there was an ancillary substance abuse program audit, and then in 2013, our normal triennial review. So right now we have 4 ongoing reviews, a 2016 triennial review with a couple of outstanding issues, a 2018 financial management oversight review. The final report is expected toward the end of next month. A 2018 DBE review. The final report was issued last month. Staff is working on the corrections and the improvements with that due to FTA by May 24th. And then, of course, we're preparing for our on-cycle 2019 triennial review. And with the triennial, we just got word yesterday that what we thought was true, any day now we'll get notice and a date on the triennial. This slide shows the normal triennial findings and improvements. This is a national data chart, and you can see that there are 18 to 20 areas. The triennial is very comprehensive, and all of these areas are touched by the review team. You can also see that the majority of the findings are in procurement, DBE, and ADA.
This is nationwide.
Nationwide. So staff attended a workshop last fall in Nashville, and these next slides show the nationwide average findings / corrections for all agencies that are subject to the reviews. A few more slides that break down the 3 larger areas. For procurement, you can see there's a half a dozen or so normal recommendations and findings for an agency. Also with DBE, and then again with the ADA, both the general and the complementary paratransit service delivery. So I'll be happy to answer any questions about these reviews, or also any questions about the detail areas.
What is the grading process if we do exceptionally well or totally terrible? What happens to our grant funding?
So they don't grade you. You are required to develop a corrective action plan, implement the recommendations, and then move forward in a compliant manner per their recommendations. We have never, in my 8 to 9 year history, failed to close a review. But if you can't do that, then your federal grant funding is closed. All of this is set for FTA to oversee the grant funds that they give to transit agencies. So the risk is always that they'll decide not to give you those grant funds.
So there is no grade, it's just compliant, non-compliant?
It's not even non-compliant, compliant. Sometimes there's a finding where you didn't do something you were supposed to, but a lot of the times it's an interpretation and a recommendation that you change a process or improve a process.
Is there anything that we can do as a board to help with these?
Continue to support staff's efforts to review the compliant programs, the DBE, the ADA, the Title VI, and support the efforts to procure things in a compliant manner.
Okay.
Sometimes we get in a hurry, and it's extremely hard to complete an FTA compliant procurement, which requires about 63 elements behind the scenes. And it's usually a 3 to 4 month process. So maybe patience with a compliant procurement process.
All right.
Okay, I think Dietrich had.
Yeah, why don't we participate in the state management?
The state management reviews are when the FTA reviews the state DOT. So some of the funds from the federal government flow to the state and then to subrecipients. So that review is more in line with State Department of Transportation and not CAP.
Terry, how do we stack up with the pie charts that you have in all these areas with our deficiencies that come in from these audits? Do we follow the same pattern, or we?
With the 2016 triennial, they pretty much, the majority of the findings and recommendations fell in these 3 areas. Where agencies sometimes have trouble with satisfactory continuing control and financial management and capacity, I think the reviewers were very complimentary of those sections for CAP. There were half a dozen recommendations in the larger group, but they were primarily on the top 3, procurement, DBE, and ADA. So average, better than average. We have talked to other agencies. There are reviews that end up with 40 to 50 corrective actions and recommendations. Ours was about half that in 16 and a third of that in 13. So I'd say on average or better than average when you look at the nation.
Do you have any other questions for Terry?
I just make sure I understand something. In these numbers, these percentages like procurement 25% could be big, could be small, depending on what the total number is. So you're saying that how many, just in the list of deficiencies, regardless of how they're allocated, what were we talking about?
So the
20, 30?
database was all findings, all recommendations for every review that was completed by the FTA in 2018. And 25% of those were in the procurement
But
area.
how many is there?
They didn't give us that data at the workshop.
So we don't know if that was 5 or 50. Specific line
No,
items.
they didn't tell us how many findings for the whole country there were. They
No,
gave us.
I'm not thinking about the country, I'm just talking about us. What does that 25% represent in numbers?
So for the 2016, we probably had 24 corrective action recommendations. Of those, a third were ADA related, a third were procurement, and the rest were scattered among the other categories. So 8.
When do you think you will close out the 2016?
She said.
Some of it depends on FTA. They had an issue with their civil rights office. Some of their staff were out on extended leave, which delayed the review process for a third of our corrective actions. And we're still in process of working through a couple of those. So when we can get the information we need from FTA and when they're satisfied that those 2 findings that are still outstanding are completed, then we should get a closeout on that review.
Any other questions? Okay, Terry, no other questions. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you get a copy of that?
You got it. Came in
Okay.
agenda, board
Okay.
packet.
Can I get a hard copy in the email form? Or is it in this right here? Thank you.
Okay, Curtis, I think the next agenda item is the executive director's report.
Executive Director report's in your packet. I'd like to ask Mr. Backer to give us a summary of HB 511.
Sure, be glad to. Let me move up here. Good morning, Mike. Good morning. I have no slides or PowerPoint to follow, so not to distract you.
You did get a haircut.
I did get a haircut. Yes, I did. I wanted to look more like Kevin Tanner, who, for those of you who know this, Chairman Tanner has a flat top.
That help.
It didn't help. No, it did not help at all. Very interesting close to the 2019 legislative session. Obviously, we spent virtually all of the session pursuing passage of House Bill 511, which was the second part of the transit bill, filling in parts that HB 930 that passed the previous year did not fill in. This particular piece of legislation was somewhat of a stretch. The only non-controversial portion of it, perhaps, was the fact that it did include the single county option for counties to levy a special purpose local option sales tax. There was concern voiced from DOT that CERTA was being taken out of their grasp, so to speak, and that there was creation of a new agency that DOT felt was duplicating or replacing the kinds of transit focus that DOT currently has. Notwithstanding debate on just how focused Georgia DOT is on transit or not, that was somewhat of a stumbling block. The Senate, unfortunately, was never on board. The legislation did pass handily out of the House with perhaps 2 or 3 no votes. 1 or 2 of those vote no on everything, even what day of the week it is. So we did have 3 hearings in the Senate. Ultimately, no vote in the Senate. The Senate just did not want to talk about transit or anything that the Senate did not want to talk about. And so once we had passed crossover and HB 211 was sitting in the Senate essentially dead, the House Rules Committee took hold of Senate Bill 200. Senate Bill 200 was an administrative measure brought by DOT to basically give them an administrative procedure for an appeal of a bid that was not awarded. Apparently they do not have a process for that. So this was something that they wanted. The House rules left that language in, but created what became to be known as the Franken Bill. And this was HB 511, the transit bill, in total. No basic changes at that point in time. HB 447. HB 447 was the governor's Delta fuel tax bill that would eliminate all state sales tax on jet fuel, and also created a half-cent excise tax per gallon on jet fuel to be dedicated for regional airport purposes. It also included the Atlanta Airport takeover bill, which got to be very, very controversial. That bill knocked around for a while, did not go anywhere. At the end of the day, the way that Senate Bill 200 emerged was that there was the Delta jet fuel bill. The debate over that was not over whether or not to do away with state sales tax for all commercial jetliners. It was over whether the state was going to set aside a half-cent excise tax for jet fuel per gallon to go to regional airports, or levy a tax of 5 cents or perhaps 10 cents to raise a significantly larger amount of money. The Delta takeover bill had morphed into not a pure takeover bill, but to creating a oversight commission, much like Martin, to provide oversight for all of the state's commercial airports, which would have included Augusta, Macon, Columbus, Savannah, and the like, which everybody was opposed to. And as I said, the Delta fuel tax was supported by the governor, one of his top priorities. The lieutenant governor and the Senate wanted the Delta takeover bill. The speaker did not want a takeover bill, basically said, I don't see anything wrong with the Atlanta airport. We don't need to be involved in running an airport. But very supportive of the transit bill. DOT had problems with administrative issues, as I said, CERTA, and creating a new agency. In the final version of the bill that went to conference committee, the CERTA language was taken out. DOT's opposition was quieted because their issues had been addressed. But that took until 8 p.m. on the last night of the session, at which time finally there was a conference committee that was appointed, which was Chairman Kevin Tanner, obviously the author of the transit bill, Calvin Smyrie, author of the transit bill, David Knight, who was one of the individuals that was advocating very strongly for up to 10 cents per gallon excise tax for regional airports. Those were the House members. Burt Jones, who was the Senate advocate for the Atlanta takeover. Steve Gooch, who was a former member of the state, or former head of the State Transportation Committee, and Tyler Harper, who was also one of the leaders of the pack for taking over the Atlanta airport. When those conferees on the Senate side were named, we knew pretty much that the passage of the bill was doomed, because no one was going to support legislation to create an oversight committee or takeover of the Atlanta airport. The Delta fuel tax bill was not controversial in and of itself, but there was quite a battle going on over how much money was going to go to regional airports, whether it was going to be a half cent per gallon, whether it was going to be 5 cents per gallon, 10 cents per gallon, 5 cents per gallon for 3 years, 3 cents a gallon for 10 years, and that really wound up being one of the key points of debate. The conferees met around 10 o'clock. Curtis and I were there monitoring all of the actions. Unlike in days of old where you could get to the conferees, that does not work anymore. They meet in private. They do not allow anyone else in. We knew it was pretty much doomed when the Speaker's Chief of Staff came up, went into the meeting, stayed for about 10 minutes, came out just shaking his head that there is no common ground. The problem was the Senate just would not negotiate. So no progress. Around 10:30, I guess 11 o'clock that night, we knew that everything was over and done with. So the bad news is HB 511 did not pass in any guise. One point on that is that everything that HB 511 was going to set up would not set up until July 1 of 2020 because there was no funding in the bill nor in the budget for that. So the bill is still alive in its original form of HB 511 or in its conference committee form that contains the 3 other bills that probably will not go anywhere. The next step that we have had some discussions about is to work with Chairman Kevin Tanner to agree to strip out the single county language for SPLOST, to let that run in a separate bill. There is no controversy about that. Everybody agrees with that. There are county governments around the state that are ready to roll forward with that pending approval from the legislature. That is going to be one of our top priorities, to make that a separate bill and then let what remains from 511, which truly then becomes a transit bill that is focused almost exclusively on the delivery of rural transit services, healthcare transit services, paratransit, and the like, can move forward on its own and allow DOT, DHS, and the other agencies that are involved with that to work together to craft something that they think that they can live with. With that, it was a lot of hard work, long hours, a lot of learning how to work with the chairman on a new piece of legislation, and a chairman who is very dedicated and devoted to what he is trying to achieve, but wants to hold all of the cards very close to his vest. And there's constant refrain when offered assistance from probably, Curtis, what would you say, 20 lobbyists up there?
Yeah.
13 from MARTA alone, GTA, 2, us, and other contract lobbyists up there trying to move this forward. His constant refrain was, I've got a plan, I've got it under control, and we'll get it done. Well, it did not get done. I think we have to figure out a way to wrest control out of the part that we want to move forward with, so that we can assure that at least this gets done in the next session. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Couple just technical questions, because this is definitely your terrain and not mine. I think it's a great idea to just pull the single county option out. It does seem like it just got totally wrapped up in something way more controversial than it needed to be. It's kind of interesting. Do bills keep their number from year to year?
They do during the 2-year cycle.
So we're in year 1 of 2 year cycle?
We're in year 1 of 2-year cycle. And I think the strategy would be, since 511 has already come out of the House, what we would want to do is to take HB 511, which is in the Senate Transportation Committee now, work with the Senate leadership to strip off everything from 511 that is not single county, and ask them to move that bill forward.
Okay.
That way we're 3 or 4 steps ahead of where we would be if we were introducing a new piece of legislation.
And then, is Chairman Tanner, is this his first year in this position?
No, this is his 3rd or 4th year in this position.
Okay.
So he is well seasoned. He is working in direct concert with the Speaker and the House leadership. The problem, one of the structural problems that you have up there this year is it is a new year of a new administration.
Yeah.
Nobody fully understood what the governor's legislative priorities were going to be. And as an aside, you have to stop for a minute and say, wait a minute, the governor could not get the Delta bill passed. What's wrong with that? The Senate, under new leadership, is trying to figure out what their priorities are. The House is trying to gain control on some semblance of sanity, and so it was very difficult to figure out who had all the marbles during this session. Bill?
Are we going to have a similar situation in the House next year with new leadership?
I don't think so. While there has been a challenge to the Speaker, some of that has been personal from the opposite side of the aisle. There are supposedly only 5 to 10 members that are really concerned about the Speaker's being able to use his position as an elected official to defer court cases over a number of years, but we do not see that coming to a vote. I don't see any erosion of the support that he has through his chairman and through his leadership in the House.
Okay, another point, another issue then, if 511 is in the Senate now and you're able to strip everything irrelevant from the single county, just to be sure I understand this, at that point it could get through the House, go to conference committee, and be done?
No, it is already in the Senate. It is lying in the Senate before the Senate Transportation Committee, where it did not have a hearing. One of the reasons, I'm sorry, it had 3 hearings but no vote. One of the reasons professed that it did not have a vote was that the bill was too complicated. There were too many moving parts and issues. By taking out everything but single county, we have removed that argument because there's only one issue there, and the issue is moving from 2 county, which is already in law, to making it single county. The Senate, it would be fairly easy for the Senate Transportation Committee to take that up, vote it out, take it to the Senate, vote it out, and if it remains unchanged, it would have to go back to the House for an agree, which they would agree, and then the bill would be done.
I guess that's kind of what I was saying, because the House has already done it.
Yes.
They would just have to adjust.
They would just have to agree with the changes, yes.
Ben is the Senate Transportation Chair.
Brandon Beach, but Brandon Beach is running for Congress against Lucy McBath and Karen Handel. He has just, we thought he was going to step down, but he has stated he is not going to step down.
That wouldn't be until the fall.
Yeah, but well, yes, you are correct. So we'll see what happens. We'll know what happens with that fairly shortly.
Any other questions for Mike? Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to have all this fun this session.
Yay!
And thanks for allowing Curtis to join me as well. He gets to share in some of the misery.
Oh, good.
So obviously, we're not paying you for results. Sorry.
So Curtis, why don't you walk us through the updates?
Okay. Service delivery update is in your packet. Mike, did you want to highlight anything?
Just a couple things. Just wanted to highlight that on the fixed route side, our customer complaints and preventable accidents were the same March 18 or 19, but year to date they're down. On the repair side, it was a little bit up. On both, actually for the month, the complaints were down, accidents were a little bit up. Year to date, we're a little bit up in accidents on the repair side, but overall, it's still a very good number. A couple other things I just want to highlight. The safety staff attended the evacuation assembly area exercise in March, and we also hosted an NTI class on developing a transit emergency plan. Can I answer any questions you might have?
I'll just note my monthly observation about paratransit. I don't know how long, I mean, this has been going on for months, and it seems to me at some point this must become a problem if we're carrying a bunch of people who aren't actually paratransit riders, regardless of what they're paying. seems like at some point it starts interfering with us being able to provide the service who do need it.
You're looking at personal care attendants or companions
Either,
or both?
you know, I mean, the clients, they're down over 9%, and this has been consistent for months, and the total clients of paratransit clients ridership is down over 9% this month, but personal care attendants is up over 11%, and companions over 15%. So we've got fewer riders, and they've got more people with them.
It hasn't been an issue as far as capacity, and they do have to schedule the ride as well, let us know if there is a companion. So at this point, it has not been an issue.
Well,
capacity-wise.
Okay, and I'll take your word for that. These numbers just don't, for this to be so consistent, I just don't understand how that can continue to be so consistent. And yes, they have to schedule a ride, but at some point, if we're scheduling these rides to make sure that we've got enough capacity to carry the personal care attendants and the companions, especially the companions, are we having to schedule extra service for paratransit riders because there's no room on the bus that we scheduled for that client?
No, because they're going to the same place. So we're still, you see what I'm saying, if it's not a capacity issue, the companions and the personal care attendants are going to the same place. So we're making the trip anyway. So that's not an issue.
How many seats are there on these new buses?
What is 12?
12 seats, and then the wheelchair lock-in box section?
3.
So there's 3, so even if they bring 2 each, that would still only be 9? Okay.
I mean, to echo off that, to me, it doesn't seem like 12 seats is quite a few seats, but it is interesting, like, what is that stemming from? Is there a change maybe somewhere else that has nothing to do with CAT, maybe in healthcare costs or healthcare reimbursements that are allowing for an increase like this? I think it's fine. I like running around with friends.
Well, and if it's not creating a service issue, that's not really my question. It's just
It isn't
a
hard.
huge question mark to me about why these numbers keep changing the way they do, because for months we've been seeing a decline in the paratransit client base, but this constant increase in the attendants and the companions. I don't understand. I mean, at some point you'd think that it would level off somehow. You know, if we're not having an increase in clients, I don't know why we continue to have an increase in the others.
Jay, do you have a question?
Yeah, I understand we're talking about ridership as far as paratransit is concerned, but I'm more concerned about the complaints. The complaints are going up as well. And what are we doing to make sure we address these complaints is very important. Because the county funds paratransit. We don't always get the complaints just here. Sometimes those complaints make their way to the county. And I'm starting to get emails from our clerk about complaints dealing with paratransit still to this day. So I don't care if everybody on the fixed route rides paratransit. I just want to make sure the complaints start to disappear. So I want to make sure I say that.
That'd save us a lot of money. All fixed route would ride paratransit.
It saves a lot of money as long as they ain't complaining. I don't care.
If I had a question on fare pass sales, and would this be a correct time to ask it? Yes. All right. So if you can just help me figure out what I'm looking at. So I'm on page 7. We've got fare type, transit center, ticket vending, fare box. What is fare box?
Machine on the bus.
The machine on the bus. So is that because right here it's all zeros? Is that? Should there not be zeros?
Indicates that there were no passes sold out of the
Out
fare
of the fare box. So
That they
passes
were-
being different than tickets.
Yes.
Okay. That is very helpful. Because you can't get one there.
You can.
You can, but nobody is. All right.
Any other questions or comments for Mike? Curtis?
Right. System development updates in your packet. Patricia, you want to go ahead and point out?
Absolutely. Good morning. I just want to highlight a couple of things. As most of you are aware, we kicked off phase 2 of our system redesign project. We held a stakeholders advisory committee on April 9th. It went very well. We had about 25 people who attended that meeting. The purpose was to unveil the two concepts that we have shared with you all. After that meeting on Thursday, April 11th, we unveiled the two concepts to the public. We had a meeting at Coastal Georgia Center. We had approximately 39 individuals who attended that meeting. We also had decent press coverage regarding it. There are a number of events that are scheduled in the community, and we are doing pop-up events. For example, on Saturday, personnel was at Earth Day, presenting information about the Let's Go concepts and encouraging people to take the survey. We have a website. If you all have not reviewed the survey that's out there, please go online and take that survey. The survey will be open until May 15th. We also have paper copies here at ITC for customers who'd like to take the survey. We will plan a kind of blitz on the platform the first 2 weeks in May. We're planning to install a public display so that we can get more of our customers involved in this process so that they can understand the two concepts that we're presenting, because right now we're in the public engagement phase. And while Michelle was in town that week, we also scheduled several meetings, one-on-one meetings with many of you. She did a presentation to the County Commission as well as the City of Savannah Board of Aldermen. She also attended a couple of neighborhood meetings. So things are going well, lots of activities. And again, if you haven't had an opportunity to visit that Let's Go website recently, please go online, read the concept report that we have out there, and take that survey, because we're hoping to surpass the numbers that we got for the last survey. And this one's a little more detailed and a little more challenging. And we also have information on our buses regarding this project. So we have some graphics in your packet just to kind of show you what some of those are. And that concludes my report, unless there are questions.
I don't have, sorry.
Yes.
I don't have questions, but I do have 3 town hall meetings set up next month. I would like to see us, not just Let's Go, but Chatham Area Transit as a whole, come to these meetings. And I guess I'll give the dates to Beverly so she can pass it on up to everybody else. I just got them confirmed, so I got to try.
What are those dates, sir?
I just got them confirmed, so I got to figure out through my
Gotcha.
email.
Okay.
So I'll email her.
Sure, because we're also planning to do an event at the Southwest Library out your way. I think that's right on the line of your district. And,
Yes, sir. That's in my district.
Yes, and so we'll be out there as well.
Well, one of the locations is Southwest Library.
Okay, because I'm wondering if it's the same
Charts up
date.
there already.
Yeah, because I think we have that one confirmed already on our calendar. But I'll look forward to receiving those dates.
All right. Thank you. I think it's 14th, 18th, and the 21st of the days. The 14th at Windsor Forest, the 18th at the library, and the 21st is at Bamboo Farms.
Thank you.
And the times, the Saturday is 10:30 to 12:30. The other 2 dates are 6 to 8.
Clinton.
I had Denise came. I didn't have her. Denise came to our neighborhood association meeting in Times Square and gave a presentation on the Let's Go thing. I got a lot of comments back from neighbors that were really interested in this. We're really glad that she did it. She spoke very well through the whole thing. One thing that I would recommend is that we just make sure that she has all the props necessary, easels, printouts, etc. We did plan on having a PowerPoint presentation, but my cord was broken and the library's was broken, so we didn't. And so we kind of had to wield around these like fairly large, foam signs. And I think there were also a couple key slides that weren't printed out that are very effective and are difficult to communicate unless you look at it visually. And so I just think if we just make sure that she's got everything she needs and you've got everything you need to be able to like pop up stuff, make it look good, slick, sexy, and cool.
Right, at that point, we hadn't gotten the smaller signs printed up yet, so we had the large signs that we used at the stakeholders meeting.
Yeah, which are great because they're
Yes.
so big. But then
now we have
they're
a
also
smaller
big.
set for meetings like that.
Excellent. And then the other thing too is I've just noticed as well. It's very encouraging to see the Instagram and Facebook and Twitter sort of take on more what I like to call authenticity and sharing stories of our riders and the bus drivers and appreciation for both of those groups, and that's really great as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Curtis, keep it rolling.
Financial updates in your packet. Terry, you want to point out anything?
So Commissioner Ellis had requested hard copies of all of the budget documents. So the notebook at everybody's place is a hard copy of everything from the first workshop through the second workshop and today's first reading. There's room left in the notebook for the eventual budget book. I'd like to thank Beverly and Dion for their time and efforts putting this book together for us. And with that, the financial update is in your packet. I'll answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Terry?
I did have one, if I can find it here now. It seemed like, never mind. Well, can it be a budget question too?
Can, yes.
Okay. We had something like a 600,000 increase in revenue, I think, projected, or maybe that was for this year. I can't remember well.
Are you looking at the projected and the change between the 1.3 that we talked about at the workshop and?
No, I just, never mind. I need to find a specific to, I'll just, if I come across it, I'll
Right.
follow
So
up.
from the second workshop till today, there was right at an $18,000 decrease in revenue based on that change for St. Patrick's Day from a weekend to a weekday.
It was something where, we were projecting an increase, but then in terms of the millage and fare box, it only explained about half of it. And that's just, I guess, confirming that other half is coming from grant money, from federal money. I guess that's the only place it could come from. But if I don't have specifics, never mind.
It's
I should have made a note.
mainly expenditures that don't include a debt payment because the debt's paid.
If you come across a bill, why don't you
Yeah, I'll
email it to her
follow
and she
it up.
can answer all of us at the same time.
I just need to read back through it again. I should have made a note, but I didn't.
We updated for the presentation today, we updated the projection
Yeah, I went
to the most recent one, and it changed from the December, of course, for 3 months worth of business. So there was a change there, but if it's a general question about revenue,
it's our
just send it
budget
on
book.
and I'll respond to the group.
Yeah, fortunately, the city does the budget in the fall.
Doctor,
I have a go-back question for Mike. I'm looking at the paratransit numbers, and I see only 4 complaints listed. How do we get to that? Are those complaints called in directly to somebody?
To the call center, yes.
And that's all we've got is 4?
That's all we've been reported to the call center with 4 complaints.
And did we get Dr. Williams? Is she having
never
still any
responded back
problems?
to me.
Okay.
okay, if there's no other questions, we're going to move on to old business, of which we have none.
Real quick, just to go back on one thing.
I'm going to, if this is going back to past,
That's fine.
I'm going to stop it because we have to ask the questions while we're in a section, rather than getting it in and opening all the discussions back up to the thing. So if you got a question, then ask.
I'm good. I'll pass.
Ask later, basically. So under new business, the only new business we have is we have a draft of the proposed calendar for next year. I'd like everybody to take a look at it, make sure it doesn't have any huge conflicts with anything that we know is going on. And the other thing I want to mention is that we have board committee meetings now scheduled for every month instead of every other month. Because as we begin to move towards a stronger board participation in the committee process, we're going to have to meet every month instead of every other month. So everybody look at this, and if you see any huge problems, answer back to Beverly.
Just a reminder, that was if needed on those extra meetings. We're assuming they may be
We're
needed,
assuming they're
but
going to be needed.
they may not be.
So if we have no objections, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Favor,
Raise your hand.
motion.
I think we have a weak hand showing, but I think we have an approval. The meeting is adjourned.